Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons.
This is the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, the 8th year of Chungi, 4th month, and 18th day. I'm your host, Tim Elder. I'm sitting in for the second king of Cheonryuguk, Hyungjin Moon, and I'm here today with Kyle Toffee. Thank you very much, Kyle, for coming in. We're going to start with the weather. It's 49 degrees right now in the Cheonryuguk area, so it's warmer actually than slightly warmer than it's been in the past. We've been in the 30s in these early morning hours the past several days, a week or so. But guess what? The high temperature for today is only going to go up to 50. So they're not going to have much of a temperature change today. And it's raining. It's raining now. There's light rain falling, and that rain will probably continue most of the day and all the way into this evening. Today is probably it is expected to be the coldest day of the past week and also the coming week. And around Tuesday, we're finally going to get to some more normal temperatures. Normally this time of year in the Cheonryuguk area, the temperatures are in the highs are in the upper 60s or lower 70s, and we'll probably get there later on this week. But right now, it's about 20 degrees below normal. Now I want to go to Rima for today in the Bible. I'm in Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. This is a scene where the Israelites have come out of Egypt, and they have come to the point where they are coming up against the Red Sea. And they see the Egyptian army coming behind them, and they are very afraid. And they say to Moses, because in verse 11 they say to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. But Moses tell him, hey, just shut up. Basically, he says, hold your peace. I think that's King James English for shut up. Then he prays to God, and God tells him to hold up his staff, and then the waters part, and they go, and all the Egyptian soldiers get drowned, and all that happens afterwards. And so here in verse 14, he's telling him, just the Lord shall fight for you. Just leave it up to God. God will fight for you, and you just all you have to do is stop complaining. Is what he's telling them. A very instructive rima for us, I think. I'm sure that each of us can understand what that means for our own lives. In the Cheonseongyeong, I wanted to go to page 1980. This is in the book on the Trans-Pacific or the Pacific Rim Providence. That's book 12. And I'm in chapter 5. Since the papal court on the Italian peninsula could not bring a unified world, today unification must come through a peninsula. Satan knew the Korean peninsula was to become the place that would bring unification. That is why, in order to indemnify 4,000 years, Japan entered an age where it ruled for 40 years. You must understand that the country that was under this rule for 40 years is the ideal nation to which the returning Lord, in the position of Adam, could appear. Yes, so Father's emphasizing that that Korea is the place that was prepared for Adam to come, and really the suffering that the Korean people went through helped to prepare that way. That helped them to understand better God's heart. Father really poured out a lot of blessing on Korea, and wanted very much to begin Cheonryuguk in Korea. And Korea did set some conditions to have accepted the Lord of the Second Advent, to have accepted Father, and that is why for many years it was under the protection of a Father, because even though there were some very dangerous situations, Father always set the conditions himself, and also told us what conditions to set in order to get through those situations. Most prominent, of course, that we know of is that in 1970, when Father warned that the river between Imjin River between North and South Korea. And at some points it forms the border. Could freeze and during the winter and during that winter, and if it did, North Korea, he said, was likely to invade across the ice. And so he, to set the condition for that not to happen, he instructed the blessed wives, especially in the 777 couples wives that had been blessed earlier that year, to go out pioneer witnessing for 3 years, even to leave their children behind in order to do that, leave their husbands and children behind in order to do that. And it was a very harsh condition to be set, but that condition was set, and Korea was protected, and that kind of was a turning point because, in the 50s, especially under the Japanese rule, North Korea was actually the more industrialized, and South Korea was the poor cousin of North Korea. That's because North Korea actually is richer in natural resources, in minerals, and also there were many resources also in northeast China, or what was then called Manchuria. And Japan built a very large dam on the Yalu River between North Korea and China, and developed hydroelectric power there. So Japan did most of the industrial development on the Korean Peninsula in the northern half of the peninsula, the one that's closer to China. And South Korea was basically a rice-producing agrarian society, to the extent actually that during the process of dividing the peninsula, in 1945, the United States and Russia just took a map, put it on the table, and drew a line across the peninsula. That was the 38th parallel, and decided that the Russians, the Soviet Union, would disarm the Japanese military to the north of that parallel, and the U.S. to the south. And then there were supposed to be elections, but the Soviet Union blocked the people who were trying to conduct that election from going north of the 38th parallel. And so eventually elections were held only in the south, and meanwhile the Soviet Union propped up Kim Il-sung as a leader in the north. And gradually that line on the 30th parallel became a permanent line, permanent dividing line that it became more and more difficult to cross. But during that time of gradual sort of separation and division of the peninsula, at one point the North Koreans just flipped the switch on the electricity that was going from north to south, and that turned off nearly all the lights in the southern part of the peninsula, because South Korea had very little of its own electricity production ability. All the electricity was being produced in the north and brought down to the south for the most part. Especially in Seoul, that was the case. So that was the situation then. That the north was relatively more industrialized, and the south was much less industrialized than the north. And even in the 1950s, when General Douglas MacArthur was in charge of the war there, responsible for the war, the Korean War, he speculated that South Korea would never amount to anything. South Korea was a basket case. It was one of the poorest countries in the world. If you think of today, I don't know, what would be the poorest countries in the world today? Well, North Korea maybe. But the situation has really reversed. South Korea has enjoyed tremendous development, especially in the 60s and 70s. But really it was around 1970 that sort of, where you got to that tipping point, where you had the reversal between North and South Korea. And Father, that was because Father was there and because the South was providing a venue for Father to conduct his providence, that it received such blessing. So that was a reversal that happened between North and South. The North went down and the South went up tremendously. But now what has happened is that South Korea, although it set conditions to have accepted Father on some level, has rejected Father's only legitimate successor and an heir and inheritor. So now it has set the condition for its own decline. Back again, yes. And that, and now the recent presidential election of last Tuesday, was it? Yes, it was last Tuesday that they elected a new president. Moon Jae-in is first Moon family member, clan member, to become president of Korea, or even among the kings also there was never a Moon clan. But now, for the first time in Korea's history, a man with the surname of Moon is responsible for South Korea and for Korea. But unfortunately, that does not augur well for the peninsula at all. He is a person who is does not recognize the existential threat of communism or of China, of the Chinese Communist Party. Korea has been invaded and controlled by China countless times during its history, and for much of the history, it was sending tribute to China and to the Chinese emperor. China had an emperor, Korea had a king. That means that, and the emperor was above the king. In Seoul, there is an Independence Gate, Dongnim-mun. And I'm not sure if Koreans themselves, the young Koreans especially, understand when they look at Dongnim-mun, when they look at Independence Gate, do they know what country they became independent from? And what country, and what does that gate symbolize? It's actually, they've moved it now, but it was originally located at the point where the South Korean court, or the Korean court, Seoul was the capital of all Korea then, where the Korean court had to come out to greet the ambassador from China when he came. So as a sign of obedience to China, not to sit in the court and wait for the ambassador to come all the way to the court, but to go out to that point, to the edge of Seoul, and to greet the Chinese ambassador who would come in. So the Chinese ambassador was coming in as kind of in the position of master, of owner. And the Korean king would have to go out there. So in the late 19th century, when Korea decided to finally throw off the Chinese yoke and become independent of China, they established that gate. But now, under Moon Jae-in, I think that they may have to tear down that gate. I don't know. We'll have to see what the Chinese want done with that gate eventually. I'll bet they eventually tell the Koreans to tear it down. Yeah, that's what I would expect over the next coming years. During Moon Jae-in has a 5-year term, and we'll see. But it looks like Korea is going to come again under Chinese tutelage. All right, we'll take a break now and come back, and we'll start covering the news from a Cheonryugu perspective. So we'll see you in just a minute.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Carr Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2017. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon. And I'm here with Kyle Toffee today. Good morning, Kyle.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming in at this hour. And I wanted to start going through the news, and I was talking about China before the break. And, the King has been talking about how there's going to be an Asian Union, like the European Union, that they're going to try to gather countries centering on China. And actually, that's happening sooner than you think. In fact, it's happening tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes. There's an article on Reuters about a conference that is being held in Beijing tomorrow and the next day. They are gathering Asian and African countries as well, I think, to create a kind of a new Silk Road plan. And it's actually called something else, but Belt and Road Initiative is what it's called, is what it's being called, Belt and Road Initiative. But that's happening this weekend, or Sunday and Monday. And the United States is complaining that also North Korea has been invited to that. Let me go through this article. This is a Reuters article. China welcomes all countries to participate in this weekend's forum on China's new Silk Road Plan, the Foreign Ministry said on Saturday, after the United States warned China that North Korea's attendance would affect other countries' participation. Two sources with knowledge of the situation said the U.S. Embassy in Beijing had submitted a diplomatic note to China's Foreign Ministry, saying that inviting North Korea sent a wrong message at a time when the world was trying to pressure Pyongyang over its repeated missile and nuclear tests. The spat over North Korea threatens to overshadow the summit, China's most important diplomatic event of the year, for an initiative championed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. So in January, Xi Jinping went to the Davos Forum and basically said there that, we noticed that there's no leadership in the world today, and if you want us, we're here. We're willing to volunteer. It was basically his message. They want to become a leading country in the world, and this forum obviously is something that is intended to accomplish that. Asked about the U.S. note, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a short statement sent to Reuters that it did not understand the situation. The statement added, the Belt and Road Initiative is an open and inclusive one. We welcome all countries' delegations to attend the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. So that's the formal title of the event that's happening this weekend, Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. The ministry did not elaborate. It said on Tuesday that North Korea would send a delegation to the summit, but gave no other details. China has not announced who North Korea's chief delegate will be, but South Korea's Yonhap News Agency said Kim Young-jae, North Korea's Minister of External Economic Relations, will lead the delegation. Delegates will hold a series of sessions on Sunday afternoon to discuss the plan in more detail, including trade and finance. China has given few details about attendees. Leaders from 29 countries will attend the forum in Beijing on May 14 and 15, so that's a Sunday and Monday, an event orchestrated to promote Xi's vision of expanding links between Asia, Africa, and Europe, underpinned by billions of dollars in infrastructure investment. Some Western diplomats have expressed unease about both the summit and the plan as a whole, seeing it as an attempt to promote Chinese influence globally. China has rejected criticism of the plan and the summit, saying the scheme is open to all. Anybody can come under us. We're willing to rule over anyone. Yeah, you know, it's a free world. You know, you can come, you can make yourselves slaves. We don't mind. And it says it's a win-win and aimed only at promoting prosperity. Hey, you know, we'll make you all rich. Yeah. We brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. As long as you accept the Chinese Communist Party as your Lord and Master, we'll make you rich. In an English language commentary on Saturday, China's state-run Xinhua News Agency said the new Silk Road, officially called the Belt and Road Initiative, would be a boon for developing countries that have been largely neglected by the West. As some Western countries move backwards by erecting walls, who's that? China is contriving to build bridges. Well, they're taking the talking points of the Democratic Party, aren't they? Both literal and metaphorical. These bridges are China's important offering to the world and a key route to improving global governance, it said. Despite Chinese anger at North Korea's repeated nuclear and missile tests, China remains the isolated state's most important economic and diplomatic backer, even as Beijing has signed up for tough UN sanctions against Pyongyang. China has over the years tried to coax North Korea into cautious, export-oriented economic reforms rather than saber-rattling and nuclear tests, but to no avail, says Reuters. That is very interesting that this conference is happening in Beijing this weekend. China has really stretched its influence really throughout the world. Even when I was in Hungary in, when was that? Maybe I think 2012 or so, 11 or 12, I think 12. And I was giving Kook Janim's lecture on the Strong Korea, which talks a lot about China and about the Chinese threat. And I was told by people there that actually we really can't say this kind of thing in Hungary because we don't want to upset China. You know, because we're getting a lot of help from China, people in Hungary said. And so we really are not, the government doesn't like it when people speak out against China. So even in Hungary, and of course in Africa, China has invested a great deal of money. And even in the Americas, I think in the Panama Canal, the first ship to go through the new expanded canal was a Chinese ship. That was chosen somehow. So the China's effort to expand its influence around the world is certainly continuing at a very strong pace, and this diplomatic event happening in China Sunday and Monday is going to be a major step for China, a major step for Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is trying to consolidate his control domestically, because he's going up against a former president, Jiang Zemin, who still has a lot of power in the Chinese governing structure. But Xi Jinping is trying to purge the government of all the Jiang Zemin supporters and to establish his control. And so in order to do that, as is common in Chinese history, to consolidate control domestically, they're expanding internationally. Beyond their borders, and so this is obviously in that pattern. So we'll have to see and watch this very carefully. I'm sure there will be articles coming out about this. I want to go through the major news of the day. Of course, because we get our news from online sources. Online events tend to get very prominent play. And so the main headline on Drudge this morning is "The Day the Earth Was Hacked." The Earth was hacked.
The Earth was hacked.
The Earth was hacked. Maybe I don't think individuals were so much affected by this, but yesterday a lot of institutions around the world were hacked by something called ransomware. Ransomware, where somebody comes into your computer, encrypts all your files, and then gives you a message. Oh, do you want to see your files? And all you have to do is send me $300 in Bitcoin, and we'll let you see your files again. And that's what happened yesterday. And I saw one report that said that more than 90 countries were affected. It was a worldwide, almost a worldwide thing. I don't think, were your computers affected?
Nope.
Mine was not.
No.
And apparently, Microsoft actually put out a patch for this vulnerability back in March, and people who, like most of us, I think, where our computers update automatically, Microsoft sort of pushes their new patches and stuff into our computers, which is sometimes very annoying, but because of that, I guess we were not affected, or maybe because, I guess that's the reason. And so if you are keeping your software up to date, it's not a problem. And one of the articles I said, Apple and Linux users don't gloat because there are similar vulnerabilities in those computers. It's just that because Microsoft is used more in more computers, that the hackers chose to attack Microsoft computers this time. But Apple and Linux are just as vulnerable, it said. Let's do the main story on that, just to let people know what's going on.
It's actually harder for major corporations to keep their servers up to date.
Oh, it is?
Than it is for our personal laptops. So what happens is sometimes corporations would postpone or group all these updates at one particular time because they have so many other servers involved, and so they've got things that have to be updated all at the same time, and it becomes a big deal for a government or a organization to keep their servers up to date, and I think that's probably where the biggest issue is.
Well, let me go through the AP article on this. Dozens of countries were hit with a huge cyber extortion attack Friday that locked up computers and held users' files for ransom, as a multitude of hospitals, companies, and government agencies. It was believed to be the biggest attack of its kind ever recorded. The malicious software behind the onslaught appeared to exploit vulnerability in Microsoft Windows that was supposedly identified by the National Security Agency for its own intelligence gathering purposes and was later leaked to the Internet. Britain's National Health Service fell victim, its hospitals forced to close wards and emergency rooms and turn away patients. Russia appeared to be the hardest hit, according to security experts, with the country's interior ministry confirming it was struck. All told, several cybersecurity firms said they had identified the malicious software, which so far has been responsible for tens of thousands of attacks in more than 60 countries. That includes the United States, although its effects there didn't appear to be widespread, at least initially. The attack infected computers with what is known as ransomware, software that locks up users' data and flashes a message demanding payment to release it. In the U.S., FedEx reported that its Windows computers were experiencing interference from malware, but wouldn't say if it had been hit by ransomware. Mikko Hyponen, Chief Research Officer at the Helsinki-based cybersecurity company F-Secure, called the attack the biggest ransomware outbreak in history. Security experts said the attack appeared to be caused by a self-replicating piece of software that enters companies and organizations when employees click on email attachments, then spread quickly internally from computer to computer when employees share the documents and other files. Its ransom demand started at $300 and increase after 2 hours to $400, $500, and then $600, said Kurt Baumgartner, a security researcher at Kaspersky Lab. Affected users can restore their files from backups if they have them or pay ransom. Otherwise, they risk losing their data entirely. So yeah, already we see a couple of lessons. Don't click on email attachments that you don't know about, that's not coming from someone that you trust, and back it up, back it up, back it up, back it up. See, the security holes that exploited were disclosed several weeks ago. Shortly after that disclosure, Microsoft announced that it had already issued software patches for those holes, but many companies and individuals haven't installed the fixes yet or are using older versions of Windows that Microsoft no longer supports and didn't fix. It's really annoying that Microsoft forces you to buy new software from time to time. It says, oh, we're not going to support this software anymore. What was the one before Microsoft Windows?
We had XP.
XP. I was using XP for
Vista.
Well, Vista was terrible, of course, but XP I was using, and it was perfectly good software.
It was.
But Microsoft announced that it wasn't going to support it anymore. But for our purposes, XP was fine, and I think probably people are still using XP, I would imagine.
And that is a problem around the world, especially here in America. People tend to keep their computers more up to date. But if you're talking about other countries and other places, I think it's it's an expense to upgrade.
Right, it is.
To Windows 7, 10, whatever it is.
Yeah. You basically have to wind up buying a new computer is what it usually amounts to, because it's the difference in price between updating to a new, like going from XP to 7 or 10, or buying a new computer isn't all that different. Or if you're dealing with laptops.
The requirements, actually have not increased all that much as far as RAM, but it does. So therefore you have an older machine, doesn't have the space and the processing power necessary for some of the new features. So,
but you see, some of these new features are not ones that people like me would use. I'm not playing games on my computer.
You are not playing games.
If I do play games, it's solitaire. It's games that don't require a lot of RAM. I'm not playing these games that are being played today by other people.
So 2000 older versions of Windows actually worked pretty well. I love my XP operating system. I mean, as compared to some of this other stuff. Okay, so I'm sure that the Linux missionaries among us are going to be very active, but it says, hey, don't gloat, because Linux is also vulnerable, and I'm sure that's true. I don't know why that would not be true. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with other news from a Chonryugu perspective. See you in a minute.
Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Carr Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2017, and the 8th year of Cheongi, 4th month and 18th day. This is Tim Elder, your host this morning, sitting here in place of Moon Hyung-jin, the second king of Cheonryuguk, and I'm here with Kyle Toffee. We were talking about the cyber outbreak, the cyber ransomware outbreak that occurred yesterday. Drudge has several headlines on this. Biggest ransomware outbreak ever. At least 99 countries attacked, it says. Could cost lives, in quotes. NSA cyber weapon. Yeah, this was what they're using apparently is something that the NSA developed, software that the NSA developed to exploit a vulnerability in Microsoft Windows so that the NSA could spy on computers around the world. Hospitals crippled, telecom snarled, German train chaos, Russian government hit, FedEx whacked, speed and scale startles experts. We were discussing before the break how, part of this is because Microsoft stops supporting certain software after a certain time, and so those and that does not issue patches for those older versions of their operating systems, such as XP and Vista. And so in the United States, the effects of this attack were not so huge because I think most people, I think, in America, including companies, keep their software up to date. But certainly in countries, I don't know why the British health system was attacked so much, but in Russia and in a lot of countries where it's difficult to get the financial resources to update software, these kinds of attacks can be very widespread and cost a lot of damage. And like it says here in this article, where they could cost lives. In the British National Health Service had major disruptions yesterday, where patients had to be turned away from hospitals. Let me see if I can get back to that article where it says hackers, this is a New York Times article, hackers hit dozens of countries exploiting stolen NSA tool. And it says this is out of San Francisco. Hackers exploiting malicious software stolen from the National Security Agency executed damaging attacks on Friday that hit dozens of countries worldwide, forcing Britain's public health system to send patients away, freezing computers at Russia's Interior Ministry, and wreaking havoc on tens of thousands of computers elsewhere. The attacks amounted to an audacious global blackmail attempt spread by the Internet and underscored the vulnerabilities of the digital age. Transmitted via email, the malicious software locked British hospitals out of their computer systems and demanded ransom before users could be let back in, with a threat that data would be destroyed if the demands were not met. By late Friday, the attack had spread to more than 74 countries, according to the security firms tracking the spread. The attacks appear to be the largest ransomware on record, et cetera, et cetera. The connection to the NSA was particularly chilling. Starting last summer, a group calling itself the Shadow Brokers began to post software tools that came from the United States government's stockpile of hacking weapons. The attacks on Friday appeared to be the first time a cyber weapon developed by the NSA, funded by American taxpayers, and stolen by an adversary have been unleashed by cyber criminals against patients, hospitals, businesses, governments, and ordinary citizens. The United States has never confirmed that the tools posted by the shadow brokers belong to the NSA or other intelligence agencies, but former intelligence officials have said that the tools appear to come from the NSA's Tailored Access Operations Unit, which infiltrates foreign computer networks. The unit has since been renamed.
Solve that problem.
Solve that problem, yes. The attacks on Friday are likely to raise significant questions about whether the growing number of countries developing and stockpiling cyber weapons can avoid having those same tools purloined and turned against their own citizens. They also show how easily a cyber weapon can wreak havoc, even without shutting off a country's power grid or its cell phone network. In Britain, hospitals were locked out of their systems, and doctors could not call up patient files. Emergency rooms were forced to divert people seeking urgent care. In Russia, the country's powerful interior ministry, after denying reports that its computers had been targeted, confirmed in a statement that around 1,000 computers were affected, which it described as less than 1% of its total. The ministry, which oversees Russia's police forces, said technicians had contained the attack. Some intelligence officials were dubious about that announcement because they suspect Russian involvement in the theft of the NSA tools. It's the Russians again.
It is definitely the Russians. I see their fingerprints all over this.
The targets included corporate computer systems in many other countries, including FedEx in the United States. It could take months to find out who was behind the attacks, a mystery that may go unsolved. But they alarmed cybersecurity experts everywhere, reflecting the enormous vulnerabilities to internet invasions faced by disjointed networks of computer systems. There is no automatic way to patch their weaknesses around the world. So let's talk about what this means for us as individuals. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kyle?
Well, two things are very troubling to me. One is that this is stolen, alleged stolen programs.
Well, let's go ahead and say that that's true. That we're not.
Yeah, it's stolen from the NSA, which means how good is their security? It's there's so much talk about leaks and information going out to WikiLeaks and all this, and just it seems like even our government has a lot of holes in its security because things are getting out, and this is extremely troubling because if they're getting this kind of software off of NSA servers, what else are they getting off of NSA servers?
Right, yeah.
And could be FBI servers, it could be almost anything. So I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But also, it is a kind of a wake-up call for us because we rely so heavily on the internet, and if there were a major breakdown of the internet, how quickly our society actually could begin to slow down to a crawl and even to a stop.
Yeah.
I mean, we get used to getting on the computer, going to Amazon and ordering a couple of things, and in 2 days it shows up at our house and so forth. But as you notice, FedEx was one of the targets of this. We just get lulled into complacency that this is the new way of life. But you've got trucking industries and everything where there's so much movement of things, of materials and everything going on, and to think that actually that communication could break down and we don't really have redundancy in that people are accustomed to having everything done by the internet. So what happens if the internet goes down, or we get annoyed if there's a storm and our internet goes down, even just for a short period of time. But we actually rely on the internet to do things like pay our bills and communicate with people. We've almost forgotten how to write letters to people and put a postage stamp on and send it. And we're so used to doing things the new way. But it is tenuous at best, and kind of almost scary that we rely so heavily on the internet.
one of the forms of political Satanism that the king has identified, he's identified four. One of them is the international sort of financial community, the Anglo-Saxon banking community, and their attempt to control people through, of course, debt slavery and so forth, and also by controlling the international financial system. And certainly, this kind of thing would be very much a part of any kind of a disruption of that system, wouldn't it? Because we're moving towards a cashless society. We're being moved towards a cashless society, and we pay a lot of our bills without cash, and by using the internet, and we even rely on the internet to. And banks, of course, will use the internet to keep track of how much of the digital money that we have, and not the real money, but the digital kind. And so this kind of thing, I think, shows also the vulnerability of that, doesn't it? That could really, our interests could be very much affected as individuals if this kind of thing gets into that system.
I think especially some of these large banks, Wells Fargo, not that I'm pointing out vulnerabilities that they actually do have, but I think still having, like when I moved here to Pennsylvania, I chose a bank that was small and local on purpose, because I don't want to just be a number on a computer with a data center somewhere in Kansas City. Nothing against anybody in Kansas City, or with tellers that might be in India. So I think there is a huge vulnerability there, and having the personal relationship with a local bank is really important. But it goes beyond just the banks, and it would local grocery stores. I mean, as they they get their trucks in, everything is kind of modeled after the Japanese method of just in time of inventory parts. When they make cars and everything like that. It used to be, the old model was that you'd have 100,000 alternators in a warehouse somewhere to make up a Ford, and the whole plan was that way, whereas Toyota really perfected the technique of just making enough alternators today for today, so therefore if they made any model changes, they don't have this extra inventory. Well, our grocery stores and other stores work pretty much the same way. They're through the internet and networks and so forth, as things are being rung up with their codes and so forth. The inventory is constantly being updated, and a lot of systems, the suppliers know, okay, yeah, this salad dressing, you're probably running low on this salad dressing. Could be anything, but your meats, to keep them fresh and so forth, are constant rotation. And generally, grocery stores, for example, I mean, they work on a very small profit margin, so therefore it's really extremely important. But what would happen if there was no communication all of a sudden? Yeah. For a day, 2 days, a week. This would only increase the problems that you would see throughout permeate throughout the country.
And so it's convenient, it's more efficient, but it does have this serious vulnerability that as the internet really is. Well, I think I began using the internet about 25 years ago. I'm thinking in the early 90s. I remember it was very new then, and that was before Microsoft Windows. We were using a DOS something or other. DOS,
Digital Research DOS.
Yeah, DOS 3, 4, 5, 6, I think, around that.
That's right.
And finally started using Windows at some point, which at that time was mimicking the Apple software. So it's only 25 years old. So we're still kind of in in the Model T era, I think, of the internet, but this kind of thing can really disrupt the whole system worldwide. And there's so much junk on the internet that I sometimes think that if we're going to eliminate all vestiges of sin and evil from the world, at some point the whole internet has to go down. Because otherwise, once you get something, if some of these pornographic things on the internet, or some of these really evil stuff is on the internet, especially on what they call the dark net, I guess. Is that what it's called? How are you going to get rid of all that unless you can bring the whole system down and just start over from scratch? But if that happens, then we're all going to be bushcrafting for some time.
That's right. You have, but also on the other hand, the internet has allowed a whole new outlet for people and news. I mean, at one point, we had the three major networks.
That's right,
and a few
yes.
minor networks telling us what we needed to know, and they were in concert with each other and so forth. And we can see now what's happening to them now that there are millions of reporters on the street as they walk down the street.
Yes.
And so on one hand, yes, there's a lot of awful stuff on the internet, but there's also a tremendous amount of independent news gathering, and there's like no time between an incident happening and when people can start finding out about it.
Yeah. Even this attack yesterday, we were finding out about it as it was going on.
As it was going on. And, things like, people can report, even from Berkeley, you can get the mainstream news through their channel, but there are other people now, as they learn to use the internet as a tool, can really break through the falseness that tends to be out there.
And certainly spreading the Second King's message, we've relied a lot on the internet. You're doing part of that. You're publishing podcasts. What's the address of your site?
We have sanctuary.audio, which is if you want audio podcasts of the morning reports and the sermons. But also there's...
sanctuary.audio.com?
No, not .com. It's just sanctuary.audio.
.audio? Sanctuary.audio.
And you can pick up, there's an RSS feed, and people can, listen, take Hyungjinim and put them in your pocket and listen to them, at a convenient time. So,
as you're driving to work, or riding the subway to work, or riding the bus to
exercising,
work.
bushcrafting.
Exercising and bushcrafting. Yeah, the growth of the Sanctuary Church would not have been possible if it weren't for the internet.
That's right.
During the last 3 or 4 years. But we see also this happening, where this internet goes both ways, as it really is a double-edged sword.
It is, yeah.
All right, we'll take a break, and we'll be back with more news from a Cheongguk perspective in a minute or so.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Tell me who will be like Jesus to the least of these.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2017, the day before Mother's Day. Eighth year of Chungi, eighth year of Chungi, and that is the calendar that Father set in 2010, and so this is the 8th year, 4th month, and 18th day by the heavenly calendar. I want to go through the rest of the headlines this morning, aside from the worldwide cyber attack that happened yesterday. On Drudge, we see that Summer of Love turns 50. So I guess that was 1967. I think Father first came to America, I think in 65, I believe.
Yeah.
That was his first world tour. And so this was a 1960s, a time when Satan was really very, very active, especially in the United States. He wanted to really undermine the Christian foundation in the United States before the Messiah could come and stand on that foundation. And so 67, 68, 69 were very turbulent years there in terms of the moral degradation of America, and also it's because of its inability to really commit itself to defeating communism in Vietnam. It was really wandering and seeking direction. Iran refining nuclear delivery system in flagrant ban violation. Bin Laden's son looks to avenge father as Al-Qaeda, quote, stronger than ever, unquote. A weekend, unusual Mother's Day nor'easter. Drought hits another record low. The New York Times publisher personal appeal to those who canceled over climate denier. Someone published an article in the New York Times, I think it was an opinion piece, questioning some of the settled science over climate change, and many people apparently canceled the climate absolutists became so incensed over the idea that someone would challenge the orthodoxy that they canceled their New York Times subscriptions, and now New York Times publisher is asking people to please come back. Study birds choose their neighbors based on personality. CNN scoop, more ice cream for Trump than others. Now, White House escalates FBI fight with attack on former director. The FBI strikes back. Comey allies ratchet up efforts. Furious. Maddow soars. Rachel Maddow is now apparently getting a lot of views on MSNBC. She's on MSNBC, right? And MSNBC is dominating. Tony Bennett cancels concert over illness. New dinosaur fossil is best preserved ever. Might have been walking around a couple of weeks ago. House of filth. Horse, pigs, sheep, ghosts, chickens, dogs, cats. Sewer line breaks. Floods woman's home with Niagara Falls of feces. 70,000 bees found in man's bedroom wall. U.S. has worst rate of maternal deaths in developed world. Washington welcomes the wealthiest. Sales of extravagant homes, cars, goods up. I used to live in the Washington suburbs in northern Virginia, and they always said that the best time to sell a house is when there's a change of administration, because the new administration people are coming in, the old administration people don't leave.
Oh.
They just get new jobs at at some think tank or other, and they bide their time for whenever they can come back into the administration. So real estate prices tend to go up in the Washington area, in the suburb area, when there's a change of administration. Musk starts digging under L.A. Inside the tunnel, park officer runs over 3 beachgoers in Miami. Man admits to duping women into sex for porn rehearsals, quote rehearsals, apparently. Maybe best to stay out of that industry altogether. White House leaks turn to flood. Staffers scream Jesus, uses Jesus' name in vain at Trump tweets. President considering broad shakeup of team. King talked about a little bit about that yesterday. North Korea says ready to talk to U.S. under right conditions. Well, Trump said that he could talk to Kim Jong-un under right conditions, so I guess only thing remains now is to figure out what those right conditions are. giving up their nuclear program.
That would be a start.
But I think for North Korea, it would be withdrawing U.S. forces from South Korea.
Not going to happen.
Sends chilling coded radio messages to South. Well, they do that all the time. For how of EMP blast isn't theoretical. Apparently, it happened in 1962 when there was a U.S. Nuclear test in Hawaii. All the electric systems went down in Hawaii in 1962. Court rules Kentucky print shop has right to avoid making gay pride shirts. Yay!
Yay.
Try to bake a cake or refuse to bake a cake. Protesting pensioners throw punches in latest Venezuela unrest. Twitter marks Dodge report tweets sensitive. Donald Jr. slams social. Scientist to chat with dolphins. Woman with flesh-eating bacteria after dog has double amputation. Okay. And let's look at what Breitbart is covering this morning. Secretary Tillerson, that's the Secretary of State, signs 2 climate change agreements, insists U.S. still reviewing policy. As a member of the Arctic Council, the United States has signed on to 2 agreements that include efforts to protect the Arctic from climate change, linking it to human activity. And so Trump is still thinking about it, but apparently Tillerson has already made up his mind. The nuclear option, Comey-gate, latest fake news hysteria for Trump-Russia conspiracists. Yes, we have a lot of left-wing conspiracies running around right now, and apparently the Russians may have been involved in Comey's ouster, according to some left-wing conspiracists. Sessions DOJ ends Holder memo ERA. Resume Holder memo era. Holder room era resumes strict drug sentencing. We'll get into that article in just a minute. Trump backslides on campaign promise to curb legal immigration. Democratic Assemblyman pushes bill to guarantee teachers cannot shoot back at attackers. I'm strongly attracted to that one. I want to see what that's about. CBS's Schieffer sees parallels of Comey firing to the JFK assassination. Kardashian sisters tape visit to Planned Parenthood. Still don't know who the Kardashian sisters are. I'm sorry. That's an area that I'm completely unfamiliar with. Comey firing not capturing Americans' attention, only journalists. That's probably true, yeah. A lot of stuff, we talk about inside the Beltway. Beltway being the interstate highway that circles around Washington, 495, and then sort of things that happen inside the Beltway or somehow often do not really resonate outside the Beltway. Seeking employment, American-born terrorists who flipped on al-Qaeda. Poll, 48% in Paul Ryan's district would vote for a replacement. So see how he does next year in the midterm elections. Poll, 21% of American voters approve of Republican health care plan, so it's not very popular. The most Nixonian thing Trump did today had nothing to do with Comey. Schiff, Trump dimming the beacon of hope for the rest of the world. Michelle Obama, Trump wants to feed crap to your kids. Rips partisan critics of her Let's Move campaign. Her lunch program was not at all popular, especially with the kids, not even with the parents. Report, Senator John Cornyn on short FBI director, Texas University backs off Cornyn's commencement invite. Law professor Turley on Comey firing, I still don't see the underlying crime here. Town hall protesters mock death of GOP lawmaker's special needs daughter. How the resistance could win the House for Democrats in 2018. Summer sweat. Hollywood braces for possible worst box office in decade. Apparently Arthur's, I think that's the movie they're talking about. It's a pretty bad movie apparently. Strikes, then this is the global ransomware attack, and they're covering that as well. And also the Pakistani mobile service provider warns users against blasphemy. Apple to send $200 million supporting Corning plant in Kentucky. Trump and First Lady celebrate Mother's Day with military spouses and families. Durban, President Trump is dangerous. A CIA director of Venezuela's armed proliferation, a real threat to America. Trump warns Comey, better hope that there are no tapes of our conversation. Commerce Secretary, China's tech plans threaten U.S. security and economic stability. And a high school has recalled its yearbooks due to inclusion of Build That Wall, Trump quote. I guess no freedom of expression there. Report, NASA reveals 4-step space plan ending in mission to Mars. Blackhawks cane gives up first-class seat to soldier. Will Ferrell, USC laughing with lighthearted speech. Cannes Film Festival bans streaming-only movies going forward. Now, New York Times prints details from one-on-one dinner with Trump. So it was one-on-one, all right, just you and me.
Just you and me.
And the details of that get leaked to the New York Times. So who's leaking it?
The person serving?
Someone is leaking it. Comey declines to testify before Senate panel. Probably a good idea. Needs to stay quiet. Go quietly. Mexican cartel kills activist mom searching for mass graves. This is a very tragic one. Mexico now is one of the most violent countries in the world, apparently.
Very dangerous.
Even worse than Afghanistan or Iraq. Bad hombre crackdown. Session ran on drug traffickers. Engelbrecht. Voter fraud could turn major election. Mika Brzezinski says that putting Conway on air is disgusting and porn politics. Politics porn. Caitlyn Jenner looking into running for office to bring GOP around on LGBT issues. I think I read someplace else that the name Caitlyn as a baby name has become suddenly very, very unpopular. Let's go to that Sessions article. Sessions, that's DOJ ends Holder memo era, resumes strict drug sentencing. And I want to look at this and think about how best to deal with the drug epidemic in America and the war, what to do with the war on drugs. The Tonga Constitution bans the government from banning hallucinogenic substances, including drugs or alcohol or things like that. It cannot ban it, but it can regulate it, through taxes or other means. But here we see that Sessions is going very gung-ho into the war on drugs. The Department of Justice announced Friday the end of former Attorney General Eric Holder's controversial policy preventing certain offenders being charged with crimes that trigger mandatory minimums. The Office of Attorney General Jeff Sessions sent out a memorandum titled Department Charging and Sentencing Policy to all 93 U.S. attorneys' offices around the country. As the nation's leading federal law enforcement official, the Attorney General has the authority to direct changing policy for all DOJ employees. This Sessions memo expressly voids the August 2013 Holder memo by then Attorney General Eric Holder that governed charging decisions until now. Most controversially, the Holder memo forbade federal prosecutors from pursuing charges that would trigger mandatory minimum prison sentences for certain categories of drug offenders, even when those charges were justified by the facts. Specifically, those caught even with large amounts of drugs were to be charged with less serious offenses that did not trigger mandatory minimums if the defendant was nonviolent, not a member of a drug cartel, did not have a long criminal history, and met certain other requirements. It is important to note that unlike some state systems, most defendants charged with nonviolent drug crimes in the federal criminal justice system are not arrested with personal use or even small-scale sale quantities. The Holder memo became relevant only when federal mandatory minimums for drug offenses kicked in. According to U.S. Sentencing Commission materials, the smallest amount needed to trigger these minimum 10-year sentences were 1 kilogram of heroin, 5 kilograms of cocaine, 280 grams of crack cocaine, or a metric ton of marijuana. Proponents memo as a safety valve for low-level drug offenders. The memo itself cites the need to reserve mandatory minimum sentences for the highest level of drug offenders and the prosecutor's role in doing so, given federal case law that requires judge follow mandatory minimums enacted by Congress when criminals were convicted under those statutes. Opponents of the Holder memo felt it demanded federal prosecutors ignore the will of Congress and deliberately circumvent the sentencing structure imposed by the legislature. In this view, U.S. attorneys were prevented from charging offenses they could readily prove and instead were instructed to conceal from juries the actual amounts of drugs defendants were alleged to have possessed or sold. In any event, the Holder memo was a radical departure from the previously governing Ashcroft memo, named for its putative author, George W. Bush-era Attorney General John Ashcroft, which demanded federal prosecutors in all criminal cases charge the most serious offense that they had a strong likelihood of proving beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. For example, most people charged with murder could also be charged with manslaughter. Most charged with armed robbery could also be charged with theft. And most of those charged with selling 10 kilograms of drugs could also be charged with selling 1 kilogram of drugs. The Ashcroft memo, from which Eric Holder departed, forbade U.S. attorneys from ever charging the lesser included offense and always charging the most serious, readily provable offense. Friday's Sessions memo reinstates this policy as the default instruction for all federal prosecutors effective immediately. The Sessions memo, however, is not a mere restatement of the Ashcroft memo. While the duty to charge the most serious offense is reimposed on online prosecutors, the memo recognizes the need for prosecutorial discretion in certain charging decisions. On high-level supervisors, such as the 93 U.S. attorneys and 12 assistant attorneys general, may approve deviation from the most serious offense requirement. This allows a degree of autonomy and discretion for individual offices not available in Ashcroft years. This discretion is perhaps most important in securing the cooperation of criminals to bring down larger criminal enterprises. Charge bargaining, whereby prosecutors agree to charge defendants with less harsh sentencing guidelines in exchange for cooperating with the authorities in other investigation, is a powerful carrot available to some state prosecutors. The Sessions memo will reintroduce that tool to the federal justice system, but only in the hands of high-level DOJ officials and only when they've made their reasoning for doing so clear to the relevant court. So there are a couple of things involved here. One is the will of the people expressed through Congress, and that's certainly an important thing because basically what the Holder memo did was circumvent that will. But then we can also discuss whether Congress was correct in having these mandatory minimums for all cases. Of course, this amount that we're talking about here is quite a lot of drugs that you have to have for these minimum sentences to kick in. Was that a kilogram of marijuana? A ton of marijuana. A ton of marijuana.
2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds.
And that's pretty potent stuff,
That's
from what I hear.
from what I hear.
I think you know, a huge problem is that people don't feel safe, and that there are people, you know, drugs are kind of a form of murder, you know, because they're killing people, whether physically or even just spiritually out there, and that there's a cartel of bringing in these drugs and so forth that are not being really brought to justice.
Let's talk about the Tony Good Constitution's clause that says you can regulate the drugs but not ban them. Similar to, you know, when in the early 20th century, alcohol was banned for a while until that amendment to the Constitution was repealed. But it's now regulated. Alcohol is now regulated. It's taxed, and also tobacco as well is regulated. And you know, the ingredients in tobacco, what goes into tobacco.
Right.
Of course, it will kill you, but you get to, you know, the government regulates the way that they kill you. drugs too. I think if they were not banned, but were regulated, and whether through government organizations or through private organizations, that the actual ingredients in those drugs are regulated, and that might be, I think that would be a much better way of dealing with this situation. You have when people take drugs, they really don't know what's in those drugs. They have no way of really knowing, because the drug dealers will take cocaine, for example, take pure cocaine, and they'll cut it with something else,
Strychnine,
Right.
other things.
or with opioids, which are much more addictive.
That's true.
So that's part of the danger of drugs. The drugs themselves are dangerous, but also what is being added to the drugs as well.
Indeed. Yeah. Actually, my father had a story. When he was young, he would be able to go into a speakeasy in Jersey City. He was underage, and I asked him, I said, you mean you were able to drink at 16? He said, well, it was just as illegal for him to drink at 16 as it was for anybody else, because alcohol itself was banned at that time. So it creates a problem in just outright banning some of these things. Causes, during the mobs of Chicago and New York and everything, just were controlling and alcohol during the prohibition of alcohol.
But one thing that people sometimes misunderstand is that, they say, they look at the new constitution, they say, well, does that mean that Hyungjinim, the second king, is saying drinking alcohol is okay, that taking marijuana, using marijuana is okay? And that's not the case. But the idea is that we're getting the government out of that process. Adam and Eve should not have to rely on the archangel to tell them, don't take drugs. That should be something that Adam and Eve, on their own responsibility,
Absolutely.
are able to do. That's not something that the archangel should be required to do. And so that is the intent there, to get the archangel out of that situation, to get the government out of that. So it's through education, through religious organizations such as churches, and through community organizations that people will understand the effects of choose on their own freedom not to get involved in that kind of thing, and also in alcohol as well. That the second king has stated clearly that alcohol is bad because it leads to greater sins. It leads to a greater sins, and certainly marijuana, he said the same thing about marijuana. That Father was always very clear about these kinds of substances that affect the mind, and that lead to greater sins. And I personally also remember Father speaking that we should always be living in communication with spirit world, and actually these drugs, alcohol, and especially marijuana and other drugs, harder drugs, disrupt that communication or put us into communication with a lower level of spirit world than where we should be. It disrupts our communication with God. So that is the reason that those are the reasons that the hallucinogenic substances are the banning of them is forbidden in the Cheonrikul Constitution, but they're still a bad idea. They're still bad for you. So there's no change in that. It's just who do you rely on? Do you rely on the government to keep you out of that, or do you do it yourself? Do you rely on family connections to keep you from going down that road? All right, let's take a break now, and we'll be back with more news from a Cheonrikul perspective.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group, With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, on this rainy Saturday morning. It's going to be a cold and rainy day. Not much wind, fortunately. That was originally predicted a few days ago, but that has not come about. And this is the 8th year of Cheongi, 4th month, 18th day by the heavenly calendar. I'm Tim Elder, your host, sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon, and I'm here with Kyle Toffee. I wanted to go to this article on wealth in Washington. Washington really is the center of power and center of corruption. And we had an article, I guess last week was it? I think it was last week, where we see that the government employees are paid a lot better than the rest of us. Especially people with only high school degrees are paid something like their total compensation package is something like 50% higher than those in the private sector. But let's see what's going on here, how Washington area is getting richer. And wealth in Washington is being redefined, the New York Times says, as the region's modest millionaires give rise to a new class of super rich. For years, Washington and its surrounding suburbs have been among the most affluent in the country. The 4 highest earning counties in the United States, as measured by median incomes, are all near D.C., according to the Census Bureau. The top 3 are in Virginia: Loudoun County, followed by Falls Church, which is an independent city treated by the Census Bureau as a county, and Fairfax County. And number 4 is Howard County in Maryland. I wonder what happened to Montgomery County. I think that used to be way up there. Anyway, the region also has plenty of millionaires. Maryland, Virginia, and Washington are all in the top 10 for millionaires per capita, according to Phoenix Marketing. But there has always been a sharp distinction in D.C. between being wealthy and being rich. Let New York and Los Angeles have the mansion-owning, Ferrari-driving, yacht-loving billionaires. The Washington elite were content with a 3-bedroom colonial, 2 incomes, and top private schools. Its handful of billionaires were mostly local sports team owners, little known outside the capital. Excuse me. Yet now, the combination of the richest White House in history and a boom in government-related businesses and technology companies is transforming Washington's affluence into opulence. There are 34 within a 25-mile radius of Washington, according to WealthX, an information services company that specializes in identifying the tribal patterns of the super-rich. That figure is up slightly from last year, and there are 2,049 D.C. area residents worth $30 million or more. Prices and sales of multi-million-dollar mansions are surging. Flashy luxury brands more commonly associated with Madison Avenue and Rodeo Drive are doing brisk business near the Capitol. Celebrity chefs are opening up elaborate restaurants and charging very un-Washington prices. Think $280 tasting menus. Along with the region's traditional Priuses and Mercedes SUVs, 6-figure sports cars like Aston Martins and McLarens are now selling well. The wealth here is exploding, said William Shawn, a longtime Washington lawyer who, as a side venture, recently opened a dealership selling Aston Martins and Bentleys. I'm still amazed at the amount of money that people have coming into the showroom. The most obvious signs are in real estate. The average price of a property costing $1 million or more rose by 33% in the first quarter, according to Redfin. That increase is among the largest in the country. Part of it was driven by the billionaires and millionaires in the Trump administration. The New York Times is blaming Trump for this. I take issue with that. I think this is a trend that has been going on for a long time, where wealth has been concentrated in Washington because that's where the power is. And people come and they get, like I said, they go into administration or they go into a think tank and get jobs in think tanks and wait for their next chance if their party is out of power. And gradually, more and more people are attracted to that power, like moths are being attracted to a light. And I take issue that this is something that has suddenly happened because Trump has come into power. Of course, Trump has hired some people who have been successful in business, but those people coming to Washington is not a huge influence, I don't think, on the overall picture of wealth in Washington. Have you ever lived in the Washington area?
Thankfully, no.
I lived there for several years, about 10 years or so ago, working for the Newsworld Communications, which was the parent corporation of the Washington Times at that time. But certainly the real estate prices were certainly going up even then, where you go in and try to buy a house, and you would take the seller's asking price, add 10% to that, and then get outbid by someone who added 15%.
That's right.
That was going on back then.
And it also affects the rental markets terribly too. They do the same thing. People will go in and, as soon as something's listed, people go in and put a bid in at 10% over and still get outbid. So we actually had a similar situation out in San Francisco with the property prices.
Yeah. So it's not just Washington, is it?
Not just Washington. San Francisco, a lot of people were in San Francisco complaining about the people coming in with money because it got so expensive for other people to rent or to buy in the nice neighborhoods. It got very, very expensive very quickly.
All right, let's go to another article. Let's go to the aftershocks that are still coming from the firing of the FBI director, and how that is going back and forth. Now, Trump escalates war with FBI, and the Bureau fights back. This is on Bloomberg Politics. President Donald Trump took his fight with the FBI to a new level, raising specter Friday that he may have taped his conversation with Director James Comey before firing him. James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversation before he starts leaking to the press, Trump tweeted. Trump also suggested he may cancel future press briefings and instead hand out written responses for the sake of accuracy, because as a very active president with lots of things happening, it is not possible for my surrogates to stand at podium with perfect accuracy. The messages followed Trump on Thursday calling Comey a showboat and a grandstander and insisting the Bureau's Russia probe would show he did nothing wrong. He said he'd sent a letter to a top Republican lawmaker declaring he has no business dealings there. Yet try as he might, Trump cannot escape Russia as congressional probes push ahead, and the nation's top law enforcement agency shows no sign of backing down in the face of the president's criticism. But the This Comey Gate, as maybe some people are beginning to call it, has really become a part of the left-wing conspiracy mill. Every time the Washington, I'm looking at the Breitbart now, every time the Washington political press freaks out and goes into full panic mode against President Trump, the blockbuster Watergate volume story always unfolds the same way. First, the news starts leaking or breaking. Newsrooms from the Potomac to the Hudson become seized and fixated on every morsel of the delicious story. News flashes zing around the internet. Then it hits cable television, and the press starts slinging the most salacious and scandalous accusations they can whip up, charging the president with the highest crimes imaginable. Each time, these reporters sink deeper and deeper into a fantasy land as they dream bigger and bigger. This time, they keep thinking, "We finally got him." Reporters and Democrats alike, not to repeat myself, reporters and Democrats alike, because reporters are Democrats, are actually now speculating about whether Mr. Trump will survive the certain impeachment hearings to come. But then, as the heavy breathing subsides and adrenaline rushes give way to factual, concrete reporting, the most damning charges fall away. Turns out Mr. Trump is a germaphobe and wasn't in that Russian hotel room. The bust of Martin Luther King is still in the Oval Office. He didn't abandon conservatives by naming his sister to the Supreme Court. Mr. Trump's tower and people involved in his campaign were in fact surveilled. Slowly, agonizingly, truth becomes very inconvenient for all these people predicting Mr. Trump's certain demise. In the end, they are all left clinging to the smallest styrofoam shard of their original story, bobbing in the harsh sea of Donald Trump derangement syndrome. The last remaining wastrels of pontificating about the scandal formerly larger than Watergate are left with just one flimsy accusation. Well, he could have handled it better, they sniff. He didn't follow Washington political protocol. Are you freaking kidding me? It all starts with charges of high crimes and misdemeanors, impeachment imminent, and when it all turns out to be fake news, these people walk away grumbling about how Mr. Trump could have handled it better. Just look at this latest Watergate, unquote, scandal. The upshot is that Mr. Trump finally fired a man who every single person in all of Washington, except perhaps James B. Comey's wife, have we heard from her?
No.
So we actually don't know that, has said at one time or another in the past year should have been fired. Why was he fired? For all the reasons every single person in Washington has stated at one time or during the past year. But if you're among the legions around here suffering from Donald Trump derangement syndrome, it is always much more sinister. Russia!
Must be.
The FBI was closing in on Donald Trump's sordid connections with the Russians, minus the laughable debunked Moscow hotel room scandal that was one of Mr. Trump's previous Watergate scandals. The FBI had just asked for more money to pursue Trump-Russia connection, we were breathlessly told. Subpoenas were just being issued to known associates of President Trump. So incensed by the lies of the scandal's cover-up, it was reported that a top official in the Justice Department was threatening to quit in protest rather than carry on working for such a criminal in the White House. And then inconvenient reality unfolds again. One by one, each of these blockbusters came down under scrutiny. Nobody quits in protest. By Thursday morning, the whole scandal has substantially unraveled. At a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Chairman Chuck Grassley, Iowa Republican, said he and Senator Dianne Feinstein, the ranking Democrat on the committee, had recently met with Mr. Comey and came away with the clear impression that, in fact, Mr. Trump is not the target of any investigation by the FBI. Senator Feinstein and I heard nothing that contradicted the president's statement, he said. And in a stunning display of nonpartisanship, Mrs. Feinstein agreed. Well, okay, but the White House should have handled it better. They say. Yeah, Comey's firing. I was surprised when Trump decided in January to keep Comey on. It would seem like he had pretty well discredited the FBI even at that point. Going one way with the Clinton emails and then going the other way. And then, building a case and at a press conference, announcing a case basically for why Hillary Clinton should be indicted and prosecuted, and at the end saying, "But we're not going to do anything about this. We know the guy. We know he shot the guy. We know he pulled the trigger, but we're not going to accuse him of murder." This basically that kind of a thing, and so if anything, I would say that Trump was probably made his mistake then. But the president has the right legally to fire the head of the FBI anytime he wants. And right now, of course, the Democrats are up in arms against this, and the reporters are up in arms against this because they don't like Trump. That's basically what it boils down to. They want somehow, some way, to reverse the results of the presidential election that was held last year. They still cannot accept the fact that, and they want somehow to get Trump out. They figure that Pence, I guess, will be better than Trump because Pence is a globalist. So, but and they're trying. And if they can't do that, then they try to curb Trump by talking with Jared Kushner and Trump, getting them to influence their father towards the leftist agenda. But I think though that Trump is, in the end, he's going to be Trump. He's going to be Trump, and firing Comey was an important step in that direction. Comey was really very much a part of the deep state that is resisting change, resisting draining the swamp. And if Trump is going to drain the swamp, he's going to meet a lot of resistance. There's going to be a lot of screams and cries, and from inside the Beltway and other places. But certainly he needs to hold that course and continue to attack the way that business has been done in Washington. That's why he was elected, and that's what he needs to do. And satisfy the 62 million people who voted for him, so that they will vote for the right candidates next year's election, and to give him more seats, more support in the House and in the Senate through next year's midterm elections. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back with more news from a Tony Group perspective right after this.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research. and auto ordnance. The Carr Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today. Carr Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Carr Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2017, a rainy Saturday morning here in the Cheonggyegung area. And we're at the 8th year of Cheongi, 4th month and 18th day. And we're going through some of the headlines and news for this morning. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon, and I'm Kyle Toffee. I wanted to go through this article on Breitbart, how the resistance could win the House for Democrats in 2018. Every 2 years, the House of Representatives is reelected. All of the seats of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives are go up for election, and people in those districts have an opportunity to either keep the same person in the office or else put a new person in. And also 1/3 of the Senate every 2 years. So I think next year it's going to be 34 seats in the Senate will be up for election. And Breitbart is right now, Republicans have a majority in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. At least in the House of Representatives, the Breitbart is speculating that perhaps Republicans will lose that majority if they're not careful. Fans of so-called resistance received a subtle piece of good news on Friday. NBC, the furthest left of the cable news outlets, won the battle for primetime ratings on Thursday evening and came a close second to Fox in overall viewers. CNN was third in both categories. This is just one data point, but it is one more piece of evidence that the Democratic base is more active, more engaged, and more willing to sit through agitprop than Republicans. Democrats defend some of their tactics, such as disrupting town hall meetings, by claiming that they are simply doing what the Tea Party did in 2009 and 10. That is hardly an accurate parallel. It would have been hard to find a Tea Partier who was paid to leave work to protest or who attacked innocent people in a riot. And when they're paid to leave work, a lot of that money is coming from people like George Soros, organizations that he funds and supports. But they do share one thing with the Tea Party, that resistance is a political force somewhat outside the party structure and hence more effective. Still, Democrats have a tough hill to climb. They must defend 25 seats, including the 2 independent senators, 10 of which are in states that Donald Trump won. That's in the Senate, 25. So 34 are up for election out of the total of 100. And 25 of are currently held by Democrats or by independents who vote with Democrats, with the Democratic Party. And 10 of those 25 are in states that Donald Trump won last fall. Republicans will only have to defend 8 seats. In the House, Democrats need 24 to bring Nancy Pelosi to the Speaker's gavel, but they are still competing on a map that was drawn after the 2010 Republican sweep, which included state legislators and governors' mansions. In 2010, Republicans were largely competing on home turf. Many of the Democrats they unseated were moderates, some of whom had been handpicked to run in 2006 by Rahm Emanuel. Unlike the Democrats' present leadership, Emanuel understood that winning the House meant winning in conservative districts, which meant choosing more conservative Democratic candidates, but forcing them to vote for Obamacare left them vulnerable to the Tea Party. In 2018, Democrats are not very competitive outside traditionally liberal districts. Their hysteria and profanity is alienating the moderate voters they need to reach. The one place where Democrats may do well is in California, because it was one of the few states to draw its new post-2000 in a way that benefited Democrats. California used a supposedly nonpartisan commission to draw up the map, but Democrats found ways to game it. Democrats are targeting 7 out of the state's 14 Republican conservatives in districts won by Hillary Clinton, and they have momentum. The Los Angeles Times reports that 800 left-wing activists turned out this week for a town hall for Representative Mimi Walters, a Republican, which was held in her absence. There is no unifying theme to the resistance yet, other than opposition to all things Trump, but that may be enough unless Republicans can muster enough enthusiasm among their own base. That may prove to be a challenge. Trump voters still support him, but many are decidedly less enthusiastic about supporting Republicans Congress who have clashed with the White House or who seem to be too eager to make swamp-like deals with the Democrats. Representative Darrell Issa illustrates the general dilemma, seen as shifting left to counter a Democratic challenge, but may lose the core conservative voters he needs in the process. They may simply stay home. Democrats are targeting 61 districts nationwide. They have not won a single special election since November, but they are moving closer. To hold the House, Republicans need to do more than remind voters of the danger of Pelosi returning to power. They will need to pass major bills on health care and tax cuts, and they will need President Trump to be in fighting form. So this is an editor by Joel B. Pollack, who is a senior editor at large at Breitbart News. And he was named one of the most influential people in the news media in 2016. So next year's now this is a civil war that's going on right now in America, and the next big battle will be the midterm elections that'll be happening in November of next year. And right now, so Breitbart is expressing concern. This editor of Breitbart is expressing concern that the Republicans may not be able to hold on to their current majority, especially in the House. The Senate seems, of course, don't want to get too complacent, but the Senate seems to be relatively safe. That if the Democrats have to defend 25 seats, it's possible even that some of those will flip to Republicans, especially in the 10 states where Donald Trump won last year. If the members of those states will give Donald Trump additional Republican seats that he can rely on to increase his majority and to increase his ability to pass legislation through Congress, that would be a good thing. But the House is a concern that Republicans need to unite and to fight for those seats.
I think, personally, I think the Republican Party needs to provide a vision for America. It was one of the things that Trump was able to do. He was able to articulate the idea that America should have its sovereignty and that we need to have a vision of America as being strong and good and going forward. You know, it was Paul Watson who coined the term conservatism as the new counterculture.
And it is, yeah.
And it is.
And actually, Trump is the resistance.
He is the resistance, and we can't allow the media to flip that, because for so long, the Democrats always presented themselves as the counterculture, but they became the main culture. So you can't be the subjective main culture and the counterculture at the same time. So I think it's important for people to support Trump because that are running for these various positions. Not be afraid of Trump, but actually because Trump touched something in the hearts and the minds of people, and if people are afraid of articulating that, that actually they will lose support. And it even goes back to like what's happening at the FBI. The media will portray that as Trump versus the FBI, but actually in reality, within the FBI, there's a whole, the FBI itself, most of the people in the FBI were very impressed by Comey and are very happy that he has been dismissed, because you do have very good people working in the FBI who have felt frustrated over the years, and but the media is trying to portray it, as Trump against the FBI. But, that's not the case. So it's important that we stay on message.
It's important what you said, that many Republicans need to get on board with the Trump program and with the Trump vision, because he did touch something deep within the American electorate, and the Republican members of Congress, both in the House and in the Senate, need to realize that and to stop working with stop making these swamp-like deals with the Democrats, and to start working to support President Donald Trump. Before the election, the media was speculating that not only would Trump lose the presidential election, but also that he would pull down many Republican candidates who might otherwise win. And they were trying to say that many Republican candidates are trying to distance themselves from Trump at that point because they were afraid of losing the election, their elections, as a result of their association with Trump. Of course, it turned out to be the opposite, that Trump won and those who supported Trump won. And I think Republicans need to realize that and to understand that this is a revolution, and they need to get onto the correct side, the right side of that revolution. Right now, the Democrats are trying to stage a counter-revolution, aren't they?
Yes.
And that is also something that always happens in revolutions. When you achieve a certain level of success, then the side that was defeated tries to come back, and they try to bring back the ancien regime, the old regime, because they were comfortable with that, and they want their perks, and they want their high incomes that was coming from that, their ability to exercise power that was taken away from them. But that can't be allowed. This revolution has to continue forward, and so the Republican candidates, the Republicans in the Congress, need to look at themselves again and to see how they are supporting Donald Trump and not trying to avoid Donald Trump, not be embarrassed by him, but to support him fully, and to go to their constituents and make it clear that they are on the side of Donald Trump and that they are going to help him pass his program, both the health care and the tax cuts. As this article says, those things are probably necessary. And it's been difficult until now for the president to get through good programs, even the health care. Even though Trump supported it, I'm sure he was not happy with the way it has turned out so far in the House. Right now, I think in another article it was saying that the Senate may pass a health care bill by the end of August. Of course, even that is not the end, and the two will be different. So the House and Senate will have to appoint some people to a committee, a joint committee, and then they will hammer out the issues and then pass a health care. Then also there's the issue of the tax reduction, the tax reform. But all these things are important steps for the revolution to succeed and for America to succeed. Already illegal immigration is down more than 70%, even without a wall. But that will not continue built. So we need to really call on the Republican congressmen to support the president and to support the president's program. Okay, let's take a break now, and we'll be back in a few minutes with more news from a Cheongguk perspective.
Someone was asking, will the Sanctuary Church anniversary be celebrated this year and when?
Okay.
At break of day, in hope we rise. We speak your name.
Become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then we will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these, when we love the least of these. Break our hearts once again. Help us to remember when we were only children hoping for a friend. Won't you look around? These are the lives that the world has forgotten, waiting for doors of our hearts and our homes to open. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then we will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these, when we love the least of these. If not us, who will be like Jesus to the least of these? If not us, tell me who will be like Jesus to the least of these. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love. Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. And just like a drum, I can hear Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on their own, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. And just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2017. I'm your host, Tim Elder, and I'm sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon, who usually does this program. And I'm here this morning with Kyle Toffee. And I understand we have a question from one of our viewers as to whether the Sanctuary Church in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania will be celebrating the third anniversary of our move here. And the answer to that question is no, we will not, and I can explain why. This year, for the first time, we are doing the events for all 8 of the holy days established by Father, plus the anniversary of Father's Ascension. And so we have these events throughout the year. And it was decided that we need to put priority on that. And so this year we will not be celebrating, we will not have an official celebration of our The second king moved to Pennsylvania in beginning of April of 2013, after he was fired as the head of the U.S. Church, U.S. Family Federation, earlier that year. And after false foundation day, where Han Mother finally and decisively united with Satan and took away the blessing of all the blessed families, blessed central families that had participated in that event or had taken the holy wine, the false holy wine that was associated with that event. So that was really the kind of the nadir, you could say the low point in the providence, where really until that point, Father and also the second king and Kukjinim were devoting full efforts to try and help the Han Mother resist Satan's temptation and to make the right decision to uphold the Father's lineage rather than her own lineage, and to crown the second king rather than to crown herself. But in that false foundation day of February 2013, that final decisive fall occurred. And so immediately after that, the second king and Kukjinim, the 2 brothers, Cain and Abel, made the decision to make a total break then with that family federation and with that fall of the Han Mother, and to move away, which was their responsibility as Cain and Abel, because that is how God's providence could continue. They moved to northeast Pennsylvania, to Pike County, and they just were praying, just the 2 families, just the 2 families of Cain and Abel were praying together, but then gradually members of blessed central families who were already in the area sort of got wind of this by word of mouth, and one by one began to join in with their prayer services and Sunday services. And then gradually that began to grow, and it grew to a point where the neighborhood association said that this has to stop. You're getting too many cars. You're parking on the street where you shouldn't be parking, and so they had to stop having those services in the king's home, with the Lake Sanctuary, we now call it. And so they had to, as an emergency measure, had to move to a hotel, which charged $500 for exactly 2 hours. It could not 1 minute over 2 hours, they would charge extra. That continued that was in early 2014, February, March, and April, I think, of 2014, and also part of May. And during that time, the king was looking for a permanent place to use as a house of worship, and a number of candidates were considered, but in the end, the king settled on this church in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, which was a Catholic church until October of 2013. The Catholic Church in this area decided to consolidate its assets and to put this church on the market then, it was sitting unused for about 6 months or so after the Catholic Church left it, and this was purchased then in May of 2014, and the first service was held at the end of 2014. And so in 2015 and 16, we had celebrations marking the anniversary of the King's move to Newfoundland. But this year, because of the many other events that are taking place that we're conducting this year, the King decided that it would be too much to have that event as well. And so this year we will not be having an event that marks the third anniversary. It would be our move to Newfoundland. Really, the community here has been growing leaps and bounds. I remember when I first came, I came in June of 2014, end of June, about a month after the move here. And at that time, the normal sort of Sunday congregation was about 50 or 60 people. I would normally count the number of people in the congregation after Sunday school. The kids were dismissed to Sunday school, so just counting the adults who were actually in the seats listening to the King's sermon. About 50 people every Sunday, as I recall. And even that was, the people in the village were impressed, but they said, oh, wait till winter, wait till winter, and it's going to go down drastically. Because this was actually built in the 60s. This building was built in the 60s, not for year-round use, but for summer use. And it had virtually no insulation. It had virtually no insulation, no central air heating, no central air conditioning or heating. The air conditioning was not needed because the way it's designed actually keeps it pretty cool. But it also had no heating for the winter. And I talked to some of the people who in the village who used to worship here as Catholics, and they said no matter how cold it got, we always went to church. And they were very proud that they would worship in, even in minus 20-degree weather. But they were using a small room off to the side, and I think they were heating that room. But then the community has grown quite a bit since then. Families have moved here from overseas and from other places in the United States, and now we have quite a large congregation, well over about 150 people, I would say, come here on an average Sunday. And not only that, but we've also started an online broadcast, streaming of our service, and generally the peak, what do they call it, the peak, the number of people or number of locations where it's being viewed at the same time is around 170 to 200 now. So, and of course, those are locations, and so there may be more people. Number of people that are actually viewing each of those locations is not known to us. We know that some congregations actually incorporate the King's Sunday service live their own Sunday services. So there may be 40 or 50 people watching in one location in that kind of situation. So the ministry has really grown a great deal, and it's being supported by donations from around the United States and from around the world. The donations from members around the world has been at about $200,000 per quarter for the past few quarters. So that would translate to about $800,000 a year. And of course, in addition to that, Kukchinim has been supporting this ministry from the beginning with with his own resources and with the foundation that he heads. So this is, and more people are waking up every day, every week and every day. And not only that, but we also have affiliated organizations now. So we have organizations in Korea and in Japan and in Europe and Africa and in Australia and Southeast Asia. And each organization is told, our policy is that when you receive donations from your members, keep 90% of it and just send 10% to the international headquarters, to the World Mission Center. And so when I say $800,000 a year in donations, that is donations that are coming from individuals. So that the donations from these organizations is in addition to that. So and these organizations in themselves are also growing and developing. And another policy that we have is that we don't have just one organization per country. In Japan, for example, there are 3 or 4 organizations that each individually connect directly with the king. And so that's a very radical departure from family federation style, where each country only had one organization and you either belonged to that or you had to leave the church. So if you got into some kind of a squabble with your leadership, or you didn't approve of your leadership, then you just had, well, you really didn't have much choice except to either grin and bear it or to sort of become distant from the church. But that's not necessary. Anybody can form an organization and can receive the anointing from the king. So anybody can be a leader, but no one is required to you. So anybody can be a leader, but no one has to follow the leader. No one. They can follow some other leader, or they can connect directly with the king. Or it's an organization of decentralized organization of freedom and responsibility. Kyle, you're one of the people who moved here. You moved here from California. I wonder if you'd tell us something about your experience coming here.
Well, first, Tim, with all due respect, you gave the numbers and the facts and all the information about the growth here. But I think people have no idea what's really happening here as far as the movement that Hyungjinim has really ignited here. My contention is that leaders from family fraud are afraid to come here, because I think if they actually came here and felt the Spirit of God here, felt the Spirit of true Father here, they could not go back. So they're afraid to even come here and be our audience. It was a little, I mean, my situation is maybe a little different than some, because I was in Korea at a time when Hyungjinim was starting his personal ministry in Korea, and I got to know him at that point. And so therefore I had a personal relationship with Hyungjinim, and I knew the man, and I understood a bit of his history going back to the days in Korea. And Hyungjinim just didn't come and hit the ground here running. I mean, he had a long history in his own personal life, in his own personal struggle to understand divine principle, understand who Father was, understand salvation. And so it wasn't just, that he came here and all of a sudden declared himself, the king, the second king. So, but what I witnessed in Korea was actually Hyungjinim's stepping into his position, not necessarily position, but stepping up to his understanding of divine principle, the importance of the unification movement, but most importantly, he came to appreciate true Father. And I think that what sparked in me, in my heart, an understanding of him was when Hyung Jin came to his come to Jesus moment, but with Father, where he really understood that Father died, 6 times for his salvation, and he personally received Father as his Lord and Savior. And I think that was really the most important point of his life, a transformational point of his life. And I was there when he went through that. And then once that happened, we saw Father, we saw less and less of Hyung Jin actually. I was kind of resentful to Father because Father kept wanting Hyung Jin to be close to him, and eventually, we hardly ever saw Hyung Jin because why? He was with Father. At a time when Father wanted and needed someone to inherit not just titles, but that heart of filial
Yes.
love.
Yes.
And so, in those final years of Father, I mean, Hyung Jin was at his side. If you look at the pictures of Father and Hyung Jin together, I mean, just you could see how much joy Father was getting by just having Hyung Jin there.
In the Dr. Panzer's presentation last Sunday, there was the video of Reverend Ken Sudo telling the people in the audience how Father was praying that there would be someone who would love God at least as much as he did or more. And that he said that he was searching for such a person, and finally found that person in his youngest son, Hyung Jin. I think that's very true. That Hyung Jin truly loves God and truly loves Father. And that's why in 2008, Father stated during the Hundoke, then we also have that video, that there is no one in the unification movement whose faith is stronger than Hyung Jin's faith. And that and Father said, appointing Hyung Jin to be his heir and successor, and to be the second king, and also crowned him then in 2009, and then in 2010 reaffirmed that with his declaration on June 10th, I believe it was, 2000. So, and if you want to be a part of the ministry, you can support the ministry by clicking on the link that is under the video on YouTube, which works apparently only in the United States. I'm beginning to find out this is something new that we set up just a few weeks ago, and we're finding out more and more that the PayPal seems only to work in the United States. Or you can go to PayPal and send, or you can go to our website, sanctuary-pa.org, and go to click on the donate button and find the link there. You can send your PayPal funds to Sanctuary Church at sanctuary-pa.org in order to support this growing movement. This is really the microcosm that is affecting the macrocosm, because Father and Hyung Jin are connected. World and the physical world, that is the unity between the God of night and the God of day. It is the unity between the heaven and earth, and it is the way in which God's direct dominion is being established on this earth. The fact that the family federation has more money, has more people, is not important, because they do not have the one element that is decisive. They do not have that connection with Father. They have lost that connection because they betrayed Father. Father did not turn against them, but they turned against Father. They betrayed Father by following the Han Mother, who has united with Satan instead of Father. And so now, whatever they do, they will not be in unity with Father, and whatever they do. So this movement by Hyung Jin, centering on Hyung Jin and as the second king, and then eventually the third king by centering on Shinjun, will succeed, and it will be victorious, just as Christianity started small, but eventually came to encompass the entire world. This movement will be the same. It will follow that same pattern, because it is connected with God, it is connected with the true Father, it is connected with Jesus, it is connected with the Holy Spirit, and that is that is where the action is in terms of the provenance. All right, that was an interlude on our microcosm, but we'll get back to the macrocosm after this short break. More news coming soon.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name. At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the night and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
And welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 13th, 2019. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for Hyungjin Moon, the second king of Cheonryuguk, and I'm here with Kyle Toffee on this rather rainy and a cool, quite cool morning. But I think this is after today, we're going to get to more normal temperatures starting tomorrow, and then building next week we'll get into the 70s. So I think we're ready for that, aren't we?
I am.
Yeah, we're ready for that. Yeah, winter's here. Are long, springs are short, and jumps right into summer. And so we'll be getting into 70s and 80s, I think, pretty soon right now. Let's, we can't go through a day without talking about North Korea, can we? So let's go to that. A senior North Korean diplomat who handles relations with the United States said on Saturday Pyongyang would have dialogue with the U.S. administration if conditions were right. South Korea's Yonhap News Agency reported. I think Trump said the same thing, didn't he?
Pretty much.
Pretty much. But the North Korea's ideas of conditions being right and Trump's ideas of conditions being right are quite different, probably. Choi Sun-hui, North Korea's Foreign Ministry Director General for U.S. Affairs, made the comment to reporters in Beijing as she was traveling from Norway. Yonhap said, "We'll dialogue if the conditions are there," she told reporters when asked if the North was preparing to hold talks with the Trump administrations, according to Yonhap. When asked if North Korea was also preparing to talk with the new government in South Korea of liberal President Moon Jae-in, let's not call him liberal, let's call him leftist President Moon Jae-in, Choi said, "We'll see." The comments by Choi, who is a veteran member of the North's team of nuclear negotiators, came amid stepped-up international efforts to press North Korea and ease tension over its pursuit of nuclear arms. U.S. President Donald Trump warned in an interview with Reuters in late April that a major conflict with the North was possible, but he would prefer a diplomatic outcome to the dispute over its nuclear and missile programs. Trump later said he would be honored to meet the North's leader, Kim Jong-un, under the right conditions. So we agree that conditions have to be right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Choi was in Norway for so-called two-track talks with former U.S. government officials, according to Japanese media, the latest in a series of such meetings. A source with knowledge of the latest meeting said at least one former U.S. government official took part, but the U.S. administration was not involved. South Korea's Moon, elected this week on a platform of a moderate North Korea has said he would be willing to go to Pyongyang under the right circumstances. Again, right circumstances, right, and said dialogue must be used in parallel with sanctions to resolve the problem over North Korea's weapons. North Korea has conducted 5 nuclear tests in defiance of UN and U.S. sanctions and is also developing long-range missiles to deliver atomic weapons. It says it needs such weapons to defend itself against U.S. aggression, which is strange because right now the only reason the U.S. is considering attacking North Korea is because it has those weapons. And so North Korea says we need the weapons to defend against U.S. aggression, but in the end, those weapons are likely to cause its collapse. But I'll have to see. So, some people have said that because North Korea did not conduct its 6th nuclear test during May or during April, that they were basically the dog didn't bark and that now the crisis has passed. But it's not true. North Korea, I'm sure, is still looking for the right time and place to conduct that test, and we have to assume that it will be conducted at some point. The question is, what will be the response to that? What will be China's response? What will be America's response? Or even will America, if it looks like they're going to do it, will America conduct a preemptive strike against that nuclear test? Because the North Korea weapons situation is very serious for the United States and for allies. But that is a serious situation that continues. And another article is here about how North Korea is sending chilling coded radio messages to South Korea as a World War III. This is an article on the Express newspaper, and it says that North Korea has sent a chilling coded message across South Korea's airwaves in a defiant act designed to ramp up tensions that are already at a boiling point. At some point, journalists run out of adjectives. Ramp up tensions at a boiling point. Tension has been high for months, and Kim Jong-un's hermit state resumed broadcasting the eerie numbers via its radio station in Pyongyang last June, using them to direct their spies across the border in the south. So yes, it is, intelligence agencies have reported that there are many North Korean spies in South Korea, and they receive these coded messages through their shortwave radios. But the ghostly broadcasts, which are usually broadcast at midnight, was aired last night for the first time since Moon Jae-in was sworn in as South Korea's president. The new coded message was read out on Pyongyang radio at 1:15 a.m. local time by a female announcer. She said she is instructing number 27 expedition agents to review their foreign language lessons, according to the Seoul's Yonhap news agency. The woman then called out a series of numbers, such as number 18 on page 451. Analysts are still divided over what exactly North Korea is using the codes for. But espionage experts believe the radio transmissions are designed to give spies secret orders which they can translate using a cipher book. This method was used during the Cold War, but it was suspended in 2000 when the two Koreas held a historic summit. But the broadcast resumed last June, and since then Pyongyang has broadcast numbers on 36 occasions, including 16 this year. The previous broadcast addressed the 21st Exploration Team and read out on page 924, number 49, on page 14, number 76, on page 418, number 37. Then the voice continued with a further string of numbers and claimed for a review of a maths assignment. It comes as South Korea's new president said he was open to talks with Kim Jong-un. Mr. Moon has taken a more conciliatory line than his conservative predecessors and has said he would be prepared to go to Pyongyang if the conditions are right.
Back to conditions.
Yes. Asked in an interview with NBC if Mr. Moon's approach would mean a change in U.S. strategy, President Donald Trump said he's more open to discussion. I don't mind discussion, but it's under certain circumstances. I could probably give you a much better answer to that in a month or two. We're going to see what happens. This is President Trump talking. The North Korean situation is a very, very dangerous one for South Korea, for Japan, frankly, for China, and for the rest of the world. And I think we've handled it very well, very firmly, President Trump said. So it's the North Korean announcer reading these messages over the radio, and it's kind of an eerie situation. If you're living there, you know that someone somewhere is receiving these messages and deciphering them, and perhaps taking action as a result of them. We certainly hope for the best for South Korea. It's hard to see how that nuclear program can be eliminated without military force, either from the United States or from China. And I'm hoping that actually China will be the one that will take up the responsibility and go in there and remove what needs to be removed. Because it's also not in China's interest to have these weapons being held by a regime that is also not really all that controllable by China. So China may either destroy the weapons or put in a new regime that is more responsive to what it wants. That will bring about that kind of a change will bring about the collapse of the North Korean system, I expect. And then as the Soviet Union collapsed and as the East German and other East European states collapsed, we saw a new opportunity for freedom. Some countries took that opportunity, others did not. But there will be a new opportunity for freedom, I believe, in North Korea, and also perhaps opportunity for freedom in China as well. I think Asia is going to be changing quite a bit over the next 5 years. No one expected the changes that occurred in the East European area in the late 80s and early 90s, and I think, we'll see similar changes, I think, in the next 5 years in Asia. Really amazing to watch the communist empire collapse in Eastern Europe during that time, and things just no one could control those events. They were just happening so quickly, but opportunities arose, and people took those opportunities. Some people understood what was going on and grabbed the chance to advance freedom in those areas, or to people like Soros grabbed the chance to advance his own economic interests, and others also. The Russian oligarchs are an example also of people who grabbed the chance to build a huge but there is an opportunity for freedom as well. God has the opportunity to advance His will during such times of chaos and confusion. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back in a minute with more news from a Cheongguk perspective.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name. At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous in Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report. Rainy Saturday on May 13th, 2017, 8th year of Chungi, 4th month and 18th day by the heavenly calendar. And we have a gentleman here who is seeking employment under rather unusual circumstances. By the way, this is Kyle Toffee, but I'm not talking about.
Oh, good.
This is an AP article. As mid-career resumes go, this one's a doozy. Bryant Neil Venus tried to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan, advised al-Qaeda on potential bombing targets, then morphed into a prized informer for the U.S. government. 8 years in solitary confinement, the 34-year-old New Yorker is set to become a free man, which raises the question, what in the world does he do next? A federal judge on Thursday sentenced Venus to time served on terrorism charges, a grant of leniency based on the valuable intelligence he gave U.S. authorities after his capture in Pakistan. Among other things, he gave up the identities and whereabouts of some of the terror network's operatives. Venus, originally of Pachogu, will remain behind bars for another 3 months while officials figure out how to protect someone who's been credited with putting a target on his back by betraying ruthless terrorists. Once that's determined, taxpayers will also have to foot the bill to rehabilitate him after years on the fringes serving on both sides of the law. At least on the issue of how to earn a living, Venus offered the judge his own vision for a job, counterterrorism analyst. I would like to turn a bad thing into a good thing, he said. Venus's lawyer insisted the idea has merit, saying their client has a brilliant mind with a knack for remembering names, faces, and locations. However, his fallback, working in construction, may be more realistic. Mitch Silber, intelligence analysis at the former New York's police department, before joining the firm FTI Consulting, said someone like Venus could never get a security clearance or be trusted with sensitive information. At best, he might a think tank to let him write or speak about his life mistakes and how he would discourage youth from being attracted to terror groups, Silber said. There's a long history of turncoat mobsters disappearing into witness protection after admitting to murder and mayhem and testifying against their bosses, perhaps most notably Salvatore Saravano, who brought down the notorious John Gotti. But there are no clear template for a terrorist-turned-government cooperator. One rare example is Hajid Muhammad Badat, the British man who was picked by al-Qaeda along with Richard Reed to carry out the failed shoe bomb plot in 2000. Reed was caught aboard a Paris to Miami flight with explosives. Badat backed out and pleaded guilty in a deal that got him an early release from prison in 2010. Testifying in 2012 at the trial of a New York City man convicted in an al-Qaeda plot against the subway, Badat said he had used a job seeker's allowance from Scotland Yard to gain employment he didn't disclose. The government also paid for job training, housing, travel expenses for his family, and even cell phone and internet costs, he said. Venus took the witness stand at the same trial, describing how, after growing up on Long Island and converting to an extreme form of Islam, he traveled to Afghanistan and Pakistan in 2007. With the nickname Bashir al-Ameriki, he won the trust of senior members of al-Qaeda. He even brainstormed with militants about bombing the Long Island Railroad or a Walmart. Once he was captured, he switched sides and volunteered information that was reliable enough to open and close 30 terror investigations, prosecutors said. The prosecutors didn't oppose his release, but they were skeptical enough about his prospects to push a judge to sign off on probation for life, mandatory mental health treatment, and further cooperation in future terror cases if needed. The U.S. government will pay for his mental health care, job training, and any required protection. In a private conversation after the sentencing, Venus was relieved and he was grateful, said defense attorney Michael Bachrach, and he was looking forward to his new life, however long it may be. Yeah, this guy has really gotten himself into a difficult situation where he spent his life putting a target on his back. But you know, people really need to understand the nature of Islam. And as the King has played videos by David Woods, I think people ought to perhaps go and look at those videos, that it is fundamentally not done. I understand people, Muslim people who believe in Islam and believe that it is a religion of peace, practice it as a religion of peace, but fundamentally, at its core, Islam is a violent religion. It is a misogynistic religion, a violently misogynistic religion. And we've heard, of course, there have been articles about women who become somehow enamored with the idea of becoming Islam and go to an Islamic country and marry or even become a part of a harem, part of the 4 wives or whatever number of wives, and then regret their choice very quickly. But then sometimes they're able to make it back, and sometimes they're killed as they are attempting to escape from that situation. This man says he was captured by U.S. forces in Pakistan. And I would say that was probably happened to him, being captured by U.S. forces. And then once he was captured, he says, well, maybe not. And so he then says, okay, I hope that I can give you information and then all will be forgiven. But we live in a world where actions have consequences. And not understanding the essence of Islam is certainly a mistake that many people are making. Not all people take this man's course and actually go and fight for Al-Qaeda, go to Afghanistan and try to kill American soldiers. That in itself would be treason, I would say. Not everybody does that, but people in the United States are also, many people are not getting the fact that Islam is a violent religion, and it needs to be dealt with as such. Europe right now, countries like Sweden, I think, is pretty clearly beyond the point of no return. It's going to become an Islamic country, and it's not going to be a pretty sight when that happens. France has chosen as president a man who does not recognize Islam as an existential threat, even though it is. Britain has wisely chosen to get out of the European Union, get off that sinking ship, and to go its own course. And it's in the process right now of 2 years of negotiations to finalize that decision. And of course, Europe is trying to, some people in Europe are trying to make that as difficult and painful as possible for Britain, so that this will serve as a lesson, they hope, for others who want to leave. Hungary and Poland want to leave because they're being assigned quotas of migrants and refugees they're being told you must take this number of. They don't want that because they know that this will disrupt their fragile society. And they know that this is wrong. But the powers that be in the European Union are threatening then to put sanctions on them if they refuse to take in these migrants. Clearly, Europe is a sinking ship, or you can call it a train wreck in slow motion. There are various metaphors you can use, but its future is bleak. The United States needs to make sure that we do not follow that pattern. We need to make sure that President Trump's travel ban or the additional vetting of people from 6 or 7 Muslim majority countries is finally put into effect. Right now, it's hung up in the courts where individual judges have basically exercised a kind of a power of veto over the president. It's the president that's supposed to have veto, but these individual judges in the Ninth Circuit and the West Coast are exercising some kind of a power of veto over the president's actions. And right now, anyway, the administration is appealing that so that these people coming from some Muslim majority countries, not all. In fact, the largest Muslim majority country, which is Indonesia, is not on that list, is not at all on that list. But it is the countries such as Iran and Iraq, and I think Pakistan is not on the list, but other countries where there's a great deal of terror going on that have been that are on that list. And this list was drawn up by President Obama, by his administration and that President Trump is merely putting that into effect for the safety of the country. Because really, America needs to protect itself in this world. There's growing confusion in the world, growing chaos in the world, and America needs to protect itself. And President Trump is trying to do that. And those who stand in the way need to understand what they are doing. That is not in the interest, not in their own interest, not in the interest of the country. This country needs to be protected so that they can continue to be the light into the world, so they can continue to guide the world towards God's ideal kingdom. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, Trump is about the sovereignty of our nation and the importance of maintaining that. And I think what we see is nations in countries in Europe are losing their sovereignty as they yield to the European Union. And we're going to see how that affects Europe. I think especially over the next year or two even, we'll see some dramatic changes. And hopefully we can stay on the path of keeping our sovereignty as a nation, where we can decide who comes in, who doesn't come in, and protect ourselves, protect the citizens.
In Europe, Prime Minister May in the UK is having a general election in June, and her idea is that this will strengthen her hand to bring UK out of the European Union. We'll have to keep track of what happens in that election as it unfolds. But really, I think the UK has made certainly a very wise decision to separate itself from Europe in this time. Kyle?
I think it's exciting times where we're living in,
Yeah.
and very important, and it's important that we stand up as individuals, as a community, and also as a nation.
Thank you. I turned to Kyle to take it over for a minute while I resisted an urge to sneeze. But we're at the end of our program now, and thank you for joining us this morning. And I hope that you have a good day and a good weekend. The King will be giving his regular Sunday service tomorrow at 11 a.m., and that will be broadcast live through this YouTube channel. And if you want to support the King's ministry, you can go to the sanctuary-pa.org and find the tab that says Donate, and then you can find the various ways that you can donate. Or you can click if you are in the United States, you can click it's at the bottom of this video broadcast. It's in the About section, I guess, and that will take you to PayPal Giving Fund, where PayPal will pay. They will waive all the fees that are normally involved in a PayPal transfer, so that we get 100% of your donation. All right, thank you very much for joining us. This is the end now, and we hope that you will have a good weekend. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come. Adieu.
Jew.